Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to embark on a journey like no other. Welcome to the Glum Lot Podcast,
your go-to destination for a unique blend of recovery and discovery.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Mark. And in this podcast, we will endeavor to create a safe and uplifting space for our guests and listeners to share their stories with sincerity and a touch of humor.
Remember, we are not a Glum Lot. The Glum Lot Podcast is more than just a source of entertainment. It's a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, recovery is possible. Every story we share carries the power to inspire positive change.
So buckle up, get ready to listen, and join us in discovering the strength that lies within every individual's journey. This is the Glum Lot Podcast, where humor meets hope. Okay, Brett, so glad to be back on the Glum Lot.
It's kind of been a while.
It's been a while. I went to Europe for a while, and then
Europe went to you.
And Europe went to me, got me sick for 2 weeks with an intestinal, bacterial, viral implosion. Yuck. So that took me a while to get over, and a bunch of antibiotics.
Yeah, and I've been busy with scouts over the last several weeks, and it's just been crazy. So.
Life has been getting lifey, as it does, but we make sure we can carve time out when we can.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing. So good to be back.
And I've had a few gentle reminders out there that people are waiting. So.
Yes, I have too, yeah. What happened to the podcast?
Yeah,
I'm
are you guys still doing that?
Yeah.
Because they want to hear that you're not and something came up, right? Yeah.
But here we are. So want to remind listeners to please join our Facebook group, the Glum Lot Podcast on Facebook. And also, if you want to email us, we would love that. Communicate with us at the Glum Lot Podcast at gmail.com. So, so if there's anybody that wants to be a guest, or you know somebody who would be a guest, please let us know.
Yes.
And we will do the rest.
That is what makes this move forward. So is the stories.
Yep. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about today, and today is going to be kind of an interesting little episode because Brett and I are just going to kind of talk about different things in this episode between the two of us. Because
I can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, we just kind of want to see what's up. But I wanted to open it talking about something called in AA called Rule 62.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that I've been around AA and AA and sober for 35 years, but there are things I've learned in the last few years that I was oblivious to.
Sure.
One of them is the king baby thing, and Brett hit me to that. Another one was the morning prayer, which also I got that from Everything AA app that Brett hit me to. And then there's this one called Rule 62, which I just kind of came upon, and I looked it up, and it's kind of interesting. And it was a result of first of all, what is Rule 62, Brett?
Right. So it is don't take yourself too seriously, right? And I guess there's a story behind this that I think you should tell because you're more familiar with it.
Yeah, apparently there was a group that had a list of 61 rules they wanted to implement.
Yes.
And they sent it to the AA people in New York to get their thoughts on it. And I kind of think to get their blessing. And the return...
To improve upon things, of course.
Yes. Yeah. The return was the guy wrote a Rule 62, which was don't take yourself too damn seriously.
Yeah.
And as Brett mentioned when we were talking before the show, it is a lesson in humility and having a little self-deprecating humor about the way we are.
Right, that humor is important.
So, I mean, it's funny when you look at that with 61 rules. That was alcoholics doing what alcoholics do.
Thank God for those traditions, right?
You know what we need is some rules. Oh, yeah, that's great. Where AA is really kind of based around the less rules, the better. The simpler, right?
Especially with people of our kind, right?
Yeah.
We are. Yeah. So.
I have to remind myself of Rule 62.
Yeah.
And sometimes I see it in meetings where people just get like, you know what we should do?
Yeah.
And that's like, well, why don't you do that and I'll do me?
That's right.
And that's kind of what AA is about. Live and let live.
Absolutely.
So Rule 62 is a good little fun reminder of that. So, our guests today are two people that are very familiar to us. And so, without further ado, we'd like to welcome Brett and Mark.
Hey, Brett and Mark.
Welcome, Brett and Mark, to the
Yes.
Glum Lot Podcast.
Welcome us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And thank you for having me
Yes,
as well.
So, this is kind of a freewheeling discussion between one alcoholic talking to another.
This was also suggested before.
Oh, by a listener? Or?
Yeah, this was actually suggested. You guys we can get some of your experiences and stuff, and not necessarily your story, but just life in general, how maybe our AA and our sobriety manifests in our normal lives.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things you touched on in the beginning of this is, how do we learn all these new things, right? Like Rule 62, like how does King Baby come into play? Where are all these things, and what do they mean to us?
Yeah, and you know what? This stuff is not in the big book, and it's probably not even AA sanctioned.
A lot of it isn't.
But as alcoholics on our sobriety journey, we do get a lot from outside sources.
Right, and AA is about solving the drink problem. But there's also a lot of other problems too, right?
Yeah, and AA addresses those with the steps.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're going to find every answer to every problem in the big book.
Right.
You can find it through the steps, but not necessarily in anything. So as we practice step 11 and we try to improve our conscious contact with our higher power, oftentimes we are led to other sources of information and experience.
Absolutely.
I know for me, when I was first getting sober, I got really into Zen meditation and Eastern philosophy. I won't even call it religion because Buddhism's not really religious.
Yeah.
But it is a philosophy, and it does have tenets of religion in that it has prayers and texts and stuff like that, but that really,
an awareness of around you, right?
In particular awareness.
Yeah.
But it helped me change my way of thinking in a positive way.
Yeah.
In a more productive kind of way. So, and I know that, recovered alkies are huge in the self-help stuff.
Oh,
I know I was,
yeah.
man. I was like...
Careful with that self-help thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to come at you with that.
Yeah, well, you do got to be careful with it because nobody's there to weed out the bullshit from the stuff that works, and you could go down a rabbit hole, and who the hell knows what you're going to find.
Well, it can also, that's right. It can also make you feel kind of yucky sometimes when you're discovering some of those things. But I heard something once about that self-help topic. There was a guy that was in his house, one of us, and he got an unexpected visit from his sponsor, and he, of course, invited him in. He was very proud of something, and that was his self-help book collection. And he wanted to show his sponsor that how much work he's done on that stuff. And the sponsor was like, "Well, that's all well and good, but where is your help others section?"
Right, and that is a key tenet of the steps in step 12, and in sobriety in general, is the way to keep it is to give it away. And not only the way to keep it, but the way to improve upon it. I know for me, whenever I'm working with another alcoholic, particularly a sponsee or whatever,
that?
I do as much as I can actually. That I get a lot out of. And I remember early on my sponsor saying to me, you're helping me more than I'm helping you.
Yep.
And I always thought, what a crock of shit that is.
Yeah.
What kind of cult speak is this?
Right.
But it is. I didn't realize it at the time, but it's 100% true because I've experienced it. I know when I'm working with somebody on a step, I rework the step myself.
Yeah, that's
cool. I realize things about this step I never thought about before.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's also a great reminder of where we were and what we need to do to keep this.
Yeah. And talking about working with others, we're always looking for tools to help drive things home, right? And sometimes the big book can be a little, pretty strict. May not include everything. So what I think of is step 6 and 7. We've talked about that a lot on here, right?
Yeah.
But when we're talking about things that have influenced outside of AA, there is a book that has been very, very influential in myself and others understanding step 6 and 7, right? And that's Drop the Rock. And if you're listening, don't have a heart attack because I mentioned Drop the Rock by Hazelden.
That's not approved AA literature.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, Hazelden's very friendly with AA and its principles. It just decided to break off and do a little more on the psychological side, but that book really is important to me to be able to understand that, well, now that I'm aware of these character defects, and then, yes, it says in the big book that we should take a moment to ourselves in quiet reflection and then ask God to remove these defects of characters. But that's about as far as it goes. And in my opinion, I wouldn't have known how important those 2 steps were and the impact of doing them correctly without that tool.
That's funny you should say that, because when I was first getting sober, and 4 and 5 is like a big hump for a lot of people.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
Okay, now I've got to talk to somebody. I've got to do something. I've got to take a good hard look at myself. Yeah. That's a big one. When I got over that, I looked at 6, 7, 8, 9, and I thought, these are kind of the flyover steps.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? How much do I really got to put into this?
Yeah.
Like, are you ready to have your defects removed? Sure. Who wouldn't be?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then humbly ask him to do so. Okay, please do it. But that's not the way it works.
Yeah. And when you fully understand it, you understand the gravity of it, right?
Right. And the humility that's necessary, particularly in step 7.
Yeah.
We humbly ask him to remove these defects of character. What does that mean?
Right.
It's so much deeper than that sentence.
Yeah.
And requires, for me at least, it required more explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that from bringing it up in a meeting,
Yep.
listening to other people's experiences, and you can also get it from reading other literature like Drop the Rock. So, I get it. People say that's not approved AA literature. Is the Bible approved AA literature? I don't know, but a lot of people get guidance from that.
Yeah.
I know I got guidance from the Bhagavad Gita when I read it.
Pardon me?
The Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
Yes, the text. I read that, and there was some pretty profound stuff in there, and also from a lot of Buddhist writings,
Okay.
and Zen writings that I read, and Thich Nhat Hanh, and all these great guys that have written these great things. They're not AA approved literature, so it's tough to use that with a sponsee because that's not how it works.
See, it's not. But it's only tough until your sponsee's not getting something, right?
Yeah,
and sometimes you have to bring in some outside references to do that.
Yeah, and I've always been a fan of that.
Yeah,
you just got to be careful, and it's not for everyone. Mm-hmm. Everything that I've read that worked for me is not going to work for everyone.
Well, there's suggestions.
Whereas the big book, if you want to get sober, that will work for everyone.
Yeah.
But that is a set of instructions.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm treading on territory that I don't fully understand, I may need to look elsewhere for a little more clarity.
Yeah.
And I get that. I got a lot of it through my sponsor. I got a lot of it through meetings. And I got a lot of it through reading other things.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would read something else and I'm like, oh, this doesn't really apply to what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Self-improvement.
Yeah. There,
okay.
I like that one.
So we get it through the steps,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Not really self-help.
Yeah.
Self-improvement is what we're striving for.
Yeah, and I got the awareness how that is, how important that is, right? Self-care, even.
Self-care, yeah.
Right, and how important that is.
Even things like, developing boundaries. That's a big thing.
Yes, yes.
And there are a million, AA really is. It's a simple program, but if you look deep into it, there really are a million little things.
Oh my gosh,
that go on.
Yeah, and it's just so funny. You talked about how when you are reading with or working with the steps with somebody. I just had this happen just Thursday night. It was crazy. I was reading in the big book, in Bill's story, and he was talking about how he remembers as a child listening to his grandfather complaining about religion, and he was sitting up on a hill, it said, and he could overhear these things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was sitting there, I was like, any other time I just read that. But now, I read it now, and all I saw in that was I was up on that hill, just overhearing things and not listening to any of the good things that people were trying to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so cool, but without that, working with another alcoholic and keeping that mind open to do that, it's just really neat.
Yeah, and
stuff.
here's another thing too: is things that didn't make sense to me early sobriety make sense to me now.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And so we don't get a cure for the disease, but we do mature in our wisdom.
Oh.
And when we use the serenity prayer, God grant me the wisdom to know the difference. That wisdom comes through time and learning and
experience.
Sometimes suffering and experiencing. Yeah.
Trying new things.
Yeah. And so, up to this point, we've kind of talked about the sponsorship or working with others kind of side of it, but let's talk about the other side of it, which is the person who's new and what we can suggest to them through our experience, strength, and hope.
All right.
For me, personally, it took, when I came into AA, I was given the answer, I was given the solution, and I had to beat the shit out of myself some more to believe it 100%. I wanted to hang on to 90% of it.
I got you.
And it failed. And when they talk about thoroughly follow our path, it means thoroughly. It means 100% surrender.
It does.
And whatever you hang on to is going to be a bitch for you. And here's the thing is, and I've always said this about kind of life in general, but the lessons are taught to you. And that's great. You can learn from that and change things and make your life better. The only problem is the lesson will be taught until it is learned. And that was for me. That's what happened with me. The lesson I didn't learn was 100% surrender and thoroughly following the path. I hung on to bits and pieces. And, those bits and pieces got smaller as I kept going out my first 6 months. And the sixth time I went out, that last piece was just like slapped right out of me by alcohol. And I was just in utter defeat and in a dark place. And I finally received the gift of desperation where I was like, I don't care what it takes. I don't care what my ego is telling me. I am not going to be okay doing it this way. I've got to find a different way. And this is the way I've seen it work for hundreds of people that I've met in these rooms.
Yeah.
And so I was brought to my knees.
Yeah.
And that's what it took.
And so for me, it was a little bit different. I think, and I've told it in my story, when my counselor just looked at me, my new counselor within 15 minutes said that you're an alcoholic, and it just floored me, right? And she goes, a few times later when we had spoken, she says, there's a few words that are going to be very important for your recovery, and that is surrender, right? Willingness. And those two were the really, really big ones for me. And so when I first came in the rooms, and I've not gone back out, right? I think just from that shock that she gave me when she discovered who I was, and she actually told me to my face when I couldn't even tell myself that. As these things were starting to be suggested to me, I just made the decision that I am not going to fight any of it. And let me tell you, you talked about maturity a little while ago. I would have never shown that kind of maturity, but something, I don't know what it is, but whenever there was something suggested, I gave up everything and just went for it.
Right. It's like the truth finally hit you square in the face.
Yeah. And then every time I would do that, well, then I would get the feeling, right? Because it would work. When they tell you this, you have to do this for this result. Well, then it would work, and then it started snowballing for me. Every time, I'd get that little more motivation that, surrendering, being a little willing to try something new is rewarding.
Right. You built momentum.
Yes.
You built momentum.
And it's still going on.
Yeah. And I know for me and for a lot of people early on, it's like you come into AA in a very bad state. Yeah. You get a taste of sobriety for whatever it's going to take, a week, a month, 6 months, whatever it is. And then you start getting away from the program. You start getting away from talking to your sponsor and especially going to meetings. And the momentum just peters out. Yeah. And then it's only a matter of time.
We see it all the time.
Till your disease of denial starts getting pretty goddamn loud. And you're like, yeah, I get it. And then your momentum's going the other way. And they say you're either going towards a drink or away from a drink. Well, and it is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and it is just indetectable to the alcoholic that he's turned the other way and going towards a drink, because this disease of denial in our ego is saying, dude, you're fine. Yeah. And I'll tell you, one way it worked with me was I came in a very dark place. I met my sponsor, and I got hit hard with AA, full on for a week. And for that week, I didn't drink, and I felt really good. And then after that week, it was day 7 or 8 or whatever it was, I thought, geez, I've gone to 1 or 2 meetings every day for a week. I think I'm going to take a night off. Yeah. And and I'll be fine. So I did. I didn't go to a meeting that day, and I didn't talk to my sponsor that day either. my sponsor called me the next day and said, "Hey, did you go to a meeting yesterday?" I said, I went to these meetings, 7 days in a row, and I think I lied to him. I think I told him that, I couldn't. I had, commitment or something.
Yeah, we do a fair amount of that at that time.
Yeah, it was bullshit. And so what happened to me, and he said, you really got to be careful. You're new and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, I haven't drank in 7 days. Don't tell me I'm new.
Yeah, really.
So what happened on day 8 was I thought, I didn't go yesterday and I feel fine. I'm going to skip another one. Yeah. And then it was like maybe I skipped like maybe 3 or 4, and then I went out. People, places, and things seemed attractive to me, and I went back, and boom, I thought I was, bulletproof, and I hadn't even started to get sober.
Oh, absolutely.
I didn't see that, and so that was only one of the times I went out, but it was different every time, and I was fortunate, and my message that I try to give to people, new people, I speak it up at a local rehab a couple times a month, and I always leave them with this one thing, because it was my experience, is that the only reason I'm sober is because I kept coming back. I never gave up, and I'd like to think it's because I'm a never give up guy, but it's not. It's because I was back in pain, and it's progressive, and it gets worse, and it gets more hopeless, and people find that to be true. So I kept coming back. So I always say to them, I can tell you this from my experience: if you keep coming back, if you go out and use, keep coming back.
Yeah, no,
if you get away
regardless.
even if you don't drink or use, if you get away for a week, keep coming back. If you do, you'll be successful. If you don't, you will not.
Correct. And it plays over and over again. That I do the same thing. I love the saying, keep getting to AA until AA gets you. Right? Yeah. And then it eventually does.
And then keep coming anyway.
Yeah, right. Just keep it going, right? Yeah. Absolutely.
And people say to me sometimes, "Jesus, how long has it been since you had a drink?" I'm like, 35 years. And they're like, "Why do you still go to the meetings?"
Why do you keep going to the meetings? I'm just curious.
Yeah. I really, really like it. I really have a special connection with the people that have the same disease as I have and are sharing our common solution.
Yeah.
I've never found that anywhere else in my life.
Nowhere.
And I treasure it.
Another thing to tell a new person, it's going to be weird, but it doesn't exist anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And you might spend your first couple months wondering, when does the other shoe drop?
Yeah.
When did they start asking me for things?
Right.
When did they start telling me I got to tithe 20% of my wage
right.
or some crazy shit?
Yeah.
But for me, I keep coming back because I enjoy it, and I know enough about myself and my thinking and my disease that I need to be reminded of the truth about myself, because the alcoholism, the ism still exists in me, in my personality and my way of thinking, that if I am not reminded on a regular basis of the truth about myself, I will start listening to my ego.
Yeah.
And my ego's going to say, "Dude, you got this. You haven't drank it, that. But you talk to people all the time and say, I had 11 years of sobriety. I got away from meetings. It took 6 months, but there I was. And I took that drink, and I was right back where I started."
Right where you started.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, why I keep going to meetings is, something wonderful was given to me. And I love, more than anything, seeing the potential transformations and the actual transformations. And I think for me, going back there keeps that excitement going for me, because I do work with people quite a bit, and I get to experience firsthand those people coming around and having those aha moments, right? Or when they say, "I feel weird and I can't put my finger on it," right? Because for once, they aren't thinking of themselves. So if you're not thinking about yourself, what are you thinking about, right? And there is a point that happens. And then they cross that threshold of, moving into that fourth dimension, like the book says.
Yeah, rocketed into the
and
fourth
it's just
dimension.
like, my God, and I've had pretty good luck with that, and that is a blessing for me. And, ever since I've started doing that, that's why I get to meetings, because I'm looking for that next potential one, right? But same thing is that you talk about is there's quite often where I can go back to some of those things that, I came from. And so I hear those brought up in those meetings. So when that happens, the meetings are great. But for me, it's just keeping that motivation going, and seeing the next person.
Yeah, and with long-term sobriety, when I look at myself and I say, a lot of people say, "Oh, my life's work was my children. My life's work was I built a company."
Oh boy, you're going to get me emotional on that one.
Well,
I'm just saying.
I've raised children, and I've made my mistakes. I know, and I'm still raising children. I'm still making mistakes, but I'm doing a lot of things right. And so, also, I had a business for 32 years that was, successful enough to sustain me, But my life's work is sobriety. Mm-hmm. It really is. And that comes into play with the business and with raising children and with having a successful marriage and with being, financially stable. All that hinges upon my sobriety.
Correct.
So my sobriety is my life's work. Mm-hmm. It really is. And it entails so much more than putting the drink down. That is the first step. But the rest of it is about a spiritual connection, about an understanding, about being compassionate, about listening to others and helping whenever I can, and making good decisions. And it's funny. When I was learning about Buddhism, I was also going to a psychiatrist. I had coming off a marriage that wasn't working, mm-hmm. and I was depressed and I had anxiety. I went to this. I just was blessed to find this guy. Yeah. He was a former Russian gymnast who defected, came to America, became a psychiatrist, became the head of psychiatry at the local hospital here where I live. And the guy was like wicked into Buddhism, meditation. And so I came to see this guy, and one of the things he said was, you have a real advantage over most people that I see in that you have gone through addiction and you have become sober. He goes, going through that transition is huge because you learn so much about yourself. And he started talking to me about Buddhism, and I was very curious, and he taught me how to meditate. But in talking about Buddhism, he goes, it brings me to the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism. And I was like, wait, there's Four Noble Truths?
Yes, I got to know.
Holy shit. You got to tell me I can be happy forever. Yeah, right. But it didn't work out that way. The first truth is life is suffering, mm-hmm. Because that's the way where our lives occur.
Life gets lifey.
Life gets lifey. The second is the cause of that suffering is aversion and wanting. So, the word wasn't wanting that he used. It was, I forgot. But basically, it's wanting things and not wanting things. Mm-hmm. And so you're pushing against reality, really.
Absolutely.
And I'm like hanging on. I'm like, okay, where's this going? Yeah. He said the third noble truth is there is a way out. And I'm like, holy shit! Here it comes.
Nice.
And I go, okay, what's the fourth noble truth? He said, follow the eightfold path. I'm like,
so now we got 8 things.
Wait a minute. And it was, I forgot the exact thing, but you can look it up, anybody who's listening. But the Noble Eightfold Path has to do with right speech, right action, right? It has to do with writing.
As if.
Yeah, the way that you live. And I'm like, that's kind of what the 12 steps are.
Of course it is.
It's about living a purposeful, helpful, right life and letting the universe guide you because it won't fail you.
Right.
And do I still have self-doubt about the guidance of the universe? I do, because I have an ego.
And we're human.
But it doesn't fail me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's a Buddhist thing, but I think it's also just a human truth.
Yes, and believe it or not, there's a lot of commonality between all of these religions, right? And
yes.
So, yeah.
And actually, they say they have more in common than they do different.
And again, the thing that makes them different is humans.
Yes.
Mostly.
Brett, we are the world. We are the children.
World.
Yes. But it's true. And that taught me tolerance, too. The first thing on my 4th step list was I had an intolerance for organized religion.
Oh.
Somebody brought up an organized religion. I was like, here we go.
Right.
Because all I saw was the dogma of the religion. I didn't see the common truths that run throughout both religious and non-religious thinking that exist in human philosophy and moral teachings and religion, and that they all share these things. And I came to recognize that as I was actually going through 6 and 7.
Yeah.
When I asked my higher power to help me with it.
Yeah.
I go, when somebody comes up to me and starts spouting Christian Bible verse and blah, 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 I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Yeah. I turned right off to it. And I remember we join hands, some join hands and say the Our Father at the end of the meetings where we live. And I know a lot of people are like, that doesn't belong here. Yeah. And so, and I felt that way at first too.
Sure.
So what I tried to do is look into that prayer.
In the meanings.
And find truth in it. And the first thing that hit me really hard was, give us this day our daily bread. That to me said, oh, it's one day at a time.
Yep.
Holy crap. They're saying one day at a time.
And gratitude.
That's what, yeah.
Right.
And then I started looking through the other parts of it, and I'm thinking, lead us not into temptation. So let us practice the 11th step. Yeah.
Humility.
We won't be tempted
yep.
if we're practicing the 11th step.
Yeah.
And so there's truths in there, and then I became kind of like a fan of it.
Big
all of
time.
A sudden.
Forgive us
like,
our trespasses as they trespass. I mean, that's step
forgiveness.
Yeah,
live and let live. It's all in there. But if you don't look for it,
that's right.
It's not on the surface.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's where the growth comes from.
Yeah, and man, that growth every day I can't believe where I am today. That's all there is to it. And as I sit here and hear you talk, I just constantly go back to where I was 4 years ago, right? And all the things that I am now, especially, what really rings true is when I was just out of high school, I had a girlfriend, and her mom always said, I think you're going to be a pastor or somebody that helps people, right?
No, you are.
And I was just
you're
like...
pastor of AA.
But, well, the thing is then that I just kind of brushed that off. I was a teenager, right? And then as life goes on and I became more and more self-centered, focused on success, focused on having things, all that. And then I go through this wonderful process called AA and the 12 steps. And then I realized that she saw something in me that was inside me that I didn't even know.
Right.
And because of that, the step work and finding out about yourself and your role and what makes you tick, all those things were discovered. Boy, was she right. And that's not an ego thing. I thoroughly love doing this. Like you said, I almost have I have an interest in humanity now, right?
Yeah.
And all the suffering that goes on and I find great joy in doing this now. But who'd have thought, never.
Here's the thing is like when you're out there and you're suffering with active alcoholism and you come into AA and you look at step 1 and they say, it starts with putting the drink down.
Right.
And so for me, I was like, yes, I know that's the problem.
Correct.
But I can't do it. If I could have done it by myself, I would have done it. I tried a million different things. Like everybody that's probably listening to this, we've tried everything we could possibly think of, and we kept failing. And it wasn't because we're stupid. It wasn't because we're weak, because we're bad people. It's because we have a disease.
Did you ever freeze the debit card in the freezer in a block of ice?
No, I have never. Okay. No, I didn't do that.
Anyways.
But now that I think about it, and so I look at that and I say I could not stop drinking.
Yeah.
And then I look at the first word of the first step, we.
Yeah, we.
And I needed that, and that's the only way I was able to do it. When and I went through 1, 2, and 3. And I found some kind of a higher power that at that time was just a crack of light coming through the door to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's where it all began for me. And what I learned, later on when you talk about the wisdom part of it, is that I can apply that to anything in my life, any problem in my life. Mm-hmm. I can apply that that method where you turn it over, you surrender. You talk about it.
This is funny because one of the gentlemen that I just started reading with and working with, we met him at that rehab that we both spoke at that night.
Yeah.
And he told me that the thing that really made it hook for him that he had never thought about, and that rehab is very 12-step based, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that really he had never heard of that really hooked him and made him want to come back was exactly what you're talking about. No matter what problem comes to us in life, there is 12 steps to get through that problem.
Yes.
Whatever it is, say you got in a fight with somebody. Well, step 1, we're powerless over them, right? Mm-hmm. We can't have control over them. Well, how do I get out of this, right? My ways, I'll probably keep fighting and all this. So you can just run, where did my character defects come in? Do I owe an apology, right? Was I keeping track and keeping my character defects in check.
Yeah, and
you can run through the whole thing.
Right, and the mechanism in our mind says, fuck that guy.
Right.
He screwed me.
That's right.
This is just. I am justified.
Yeah.
And
resentment.
Right, and then when we take a look at it through the lens of what we've learned through the steps in the program, we say the first thing that a sponsor will say is, what is your part in this?
Yeah,
and we're like,
exactly.
I don't have a part in this.
Yeah.
This was all them.
Yeah.
And then upon reflection, you're like, I could have walked away. I could have realized that this guy has got problems too. All these different things. And then the sponsor will say what exactly we do not want to hear. And that is, pray for him to get all the things you want for yourself. And people grit their teeth. I did.
Oh, my gosh.
I gritted my teeth and I faked it.
Yeah.
And the more I did it, the easier it was and the more effective it was. Until I got to the point where I was like, I'm really just torturing myself with this.
There you go.
This resentment.
Yeah.
I'm torturing
and we become
myself.
a slave to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Only because our ego feels justified.
Mm-hmm.
And we gotta hit back, man. We gotta hit back.
That's right.
And it's like, no, you've done enough hitting. But you're only hitting yourself, idiot.
That's right. And this is exactly what I had to go through with my stepson's situation, right?
Yeah.
With his dad. And, when I heard that you just need to pray for the sick person, and I'm like, that is absolute bullshit.
That is not going to happen.
But again, I told myself, I'm going to surrender to this, and I'm going to be willing to try it. And after several thousand times of praying for this sick person.
And you know what?
I don't even care about it anymore.
Here's the thing. Is the prayer going to benefit that person? Probably not, but it's going to be a huge benefit to you.
Yeah, of course.
And so we learn these. It's almost like opposite thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's an affirmation in that case.
Yeah, I mean,
because
it's like,
he is a sick man.
Remember the episode of Seinfeld where George would just start doing the opposite of everything he thought he should do?
No, but
he was hugely successful. He's like, all I got to do is think of what I would do and then do the opposite.
There you go. I mean, there's some truth to that.
So it's hard for us to see how that works, and that's why the program is so experiential. We have to experience it to believe it.
Yeah.
Because if somebody said that to me when I was drinking, oh, pray for the guy and be genuine, and things will get better. I'd be like, no, they won't.
Oh, here's some for my brother. Spill that on the ground, and just keep going. But yeah, no. Or it would take us to the extreme, and then we'd end up in jail.
Yes. Oh, yeah. There's plenty of those stories, right?
Yeah. Next thing I knew, they were beating my door down.
Yep. Next thing I knew, I was leaving in handcuffs.
Yeah, I broke out in handcuffs. That's one of my favorites.
Right,
but,
so.
Yeah, just cool. Jeez. How about humor?
Oh, God.
We both kind of...
I honestly think humor is God's language. Because my higher power has a great sense of humor. And I was thinking about just the other day. As I go through life, one of the best things I experience is humor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I'm fucking weird, kind of, in that I'll be driving along by myself and I'll think of something and I'll start laughing.
Really?
By myself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I know what I think is funny. And I am the funniest guy I know.
And you want to hear more of it from you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, today it happened, right? And it's such a great thing. That uncontrolled emotion of laughter, right? So today I was at a meeting early this morning, and one of our guests, Cindy, was sitting next to me. We like to sit next to each other, and because she has really some good messages, and I like to learn from those. Well, one person, we had some people pick up chips, right? And a lot of good chip picker-uppers today, and one of the people in that meeting, sometimes we'll say before we speak, congratulations to all the chip picker-uppers, and she says, good, congratulations to all the chip peepees. And I was just like, what the fuck? Everybody, it kind of blew by everybody. But Cindy, right next to me, she could not control herself. She heard chip peepees, and she goes, well, I think they should all stand up and recognize themselves, right? And it was so good because then she couldn't let it go. She kept hearing it over and over again in her head. And then I would feel the bench shake, and that would get me going. And the next thing we know, we're being completely inappropriate during an AA meeting.
I tell you,
it was wonderful.
What else is really interesting, and I experienced this at my first meeting. My first meeting, this is back when people smoked at meetings, so we broke off into a non-smoking of about 12 people. And this guy was telling a story about how he was helping a newcomer by giving him a ride to meetings, and he stopped on the way to the meeting with this guy. He was driving. He stopped and we ran into a gas station to get a soda.
Yeah.
And he came back out and his car was gone. Guy stole his car. And everybody starts laughing.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking,
the hell is
what
wrong
the
with
fuck
these
is
people?
everybody laughing about?
Yeah.
Then the next guy went, and he said, my name is so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm the guy that stole his car.
Yeah.
And there was even more laughter.
Oh, it's
and
so
I'm like,
good.
this is interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, you can say, or people have said, there's nothing funny about alcoholism and addiction, yet in sobriety, we laugh at all the stupid shit that we did.
Oh, yeah.
And the stories we tell, and because we know.
Yes, absolutely.
Just all the kooky behavior and unmanageability, we learn to laugh about it.
And I have a confession.
Yes.
I like to, if somebody, like this lady, she obviously didn't mean to say that, right? But it's funny. But then there's the mannerisms that you see in the rooms, too, that kind of get to me, right? Mm-hmm. Do you remember the lip licker?
Yes. Yes.
So, those types of things, right? It's just, God almighty.
I'll tell you, we are a sensitive group of people.
Oh, God, yes.
But we are a group of people that has a very sick sense of humor that kind of seems to run in common through us.
Yes, it does.
And there's nothing like suppressed laughter during a meeting. Like, you don't want to laugh out loud.
Oh, it's impossible.
It's like we're school kids. It's like we're in kindergarten
exactly.
during nap time. You would lay on your blanket and try to make your friend
Start
laugh to
giggling.
get him in trouble.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic.
But I'll tell you, it is so healing because it brings me back to the day when I showed up at that baseball field, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about somebody that went from 0 to 100 and plus, it was that day. And it was all a result of our absolute silliness and, being childlike and just having a good time and observing other people. That, it made me forget all my troubles. It is a great thing. They say it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile.
Yeah.
And boy, I'm glad I'm glad I have humor in my life.
Yeah, I mean, when you first come in, and I remember, even before that, when I was drinking, I thought, oh my God, I love humor, I love laughing, blah, blah, blah. But it's not the same. When I got sober,
no, it's not the same because I thought burning a kid was funny.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's definitely not the same.
But my ability to experience the joy of humor was really raised when I got sober.
Sure was.
And it still exists today, of course.
So here's the lesson, and I think we'll wrap up with this.
Okay.
Let's remember Rule 62.
Yes.
Right? All this stuff. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Yes. You know what? Take your sobriety as serious as is possible, but don't take yourself so seriously.
That's right.
I think that's where we want to go with it. So,
and just enjoy life and laugh a little along the way.
Don't drink, don't think, go to meetings.
Yes.
Yeah, what else?
Oh, and read the big book, sorry.
What else? You better have an attitude of gratitude.
Oh, yes.
If you don't give it away, you can't keep it.
Oh, my gosh. I'm being barraged. I can't even go there.
I wish I had
now.
like a 1940s mic to say this into. So it would sound like,
wouldn't that be
I would
great?
have that sound that they all had back then.
That's right.
So, but anyway, we'd like to thank ourselves for being on the Glum Lot Podcast.
Yes, I'm grateful for me.
And until next time, I'm Mark.
And I'm Brett.
As we wrap up another episode of the Glum Lot Podcast, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who tuned in today. Navigating the path to recovery from alcohol and other substances is a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and self-discovery. Remember, we're not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous, but we're here to provide a safe space for open conversations about the complexities of recovery. Your stories, courage, and resilience inspire us and our listeners alike. If you or someone you know is on the transformative journey, know that you're not alone. Join us next time as we continue to explore the diverse facets of recovery. Until then, stay strong, stay connected, and remember that each day is a step towards a brighter, sober tomorrow. Thank you for being part of the Glum Lot community.